everybody, and welcome to Incessantly Seeking. Let's talk about love. This is season 2. Today, I'm here with Rafael Agustin. This is our first ever episode in person post-pandemic. Ever. By the pool. You can hear the water. We did have a good time having some wine and talking about love and culture. So this episode is about Amor Y Cultura. And let's hear more about Rafael's journey. He just wrote a book called Illegally Yours, and it's about his journey in America, being an undocumented immigrant. And I would love to hear more about how that affects your relationships.
Wow. Should we unpack a little bit about my journey?
We should unpack everything.
Everything. Okay. Do I look at them? Do I look at you?
You can look at me.
I feel more comfortable looking at you. I don't know why they're even here. So I wrote this book, which I like to describe as a comedic coming of age memoir about an all-American family that just happens to be undocumented. The great secret of my life was that I was undocumented and I didn't know because my parents kept it from me. My mom in particular, she really wanted me not to grow up feeling different. And then when I asked her, obviously after they told me the truth, she said that one line that changed my life, where she was like, your dad didn't want you to grow up feeling different because dreams should not have borders.
Wow.
And yeah, so mom, strong Latina woman, did the best that she could. And even then, like, I was shattered when I discovered the truth about our legality. But
how old were you when you found that?
It was in high school. So It was right when I was applying to get a driver's license and applying to go to college. So I think I was like 16. So at 16, my all-American life came crashing down on me.
So did you apply to college? Did you get a driver's license?
Well,
how did that happen?
So I applied to all these like UCs because we grew up in California, like grew up here in Southern California. And I remember there was one university that sent a letter to me that said, "You are our perfect candidate. Can you please send us your real social security number?" I know. That's when I was like, "Mom, what does this mean?" And that's when like we had to talk about the truth of everything.
I would like to reiterate that we're sitting by Rafael's pool right now. So it worked out very well. He got his first home for his mama and his abuelita.
I did.
So let's hear more. Did you think throughout your life in America, where you found yourself to be an undocumented immigrant, did that affect your romantic relationships?
Well, I mean, I remember right out of high school, I had a girlfriend, and she says she would marry me for my papers. So that in itself is a weird.
Did you?
No, we didn't. But I mean, I dedicate a section in the acknowledgments to her because I was like the little kid that I used to be. Like, can't thank her enough for wanting to do that for me.
Right.
Luckily, my paperwork came after like 14 years. Our paperwork was processed, so I didn't have to get married. But that would have been interesting to marry someone not out of love, but out of necessity, right? So I don't know. Did it affect? Yes, of course. Now that I think about it, being undocumented immigrants meant that we moved a lot. I went to 7 different schools before I got to high school because my parents would find work wherever they could. Someone would discover their legality and then we had to pack up and leave. So I remember moving an awful lot. And I feel like now as an adult, I can look back and realize we didn't set roots anywhere. I didn't grow up setting roots anywhere. So even buying this house for my mom, like, it's telling that I had the money, but I wouldn't buy it for myself.
Why not? That's very interesting.
Because, again, I'm now realizing from the lack of setting roots, I feel more comfortable knowing that, oh, this is for my mom because I have to go. I have to go again. Every so often, I feel like I have to pack up and leave and take off to my next journey. And I think that's part of growing up undocumented in the United States.
Interesting. Do you think that sense of fleeing has affected your relationship?
For sure.
Because there's like the fight or flight, right? And I think I've been guilty of that too. Like, I feel like there are times that I wish I've stayed and fought, but instead I fled because it was part of it was, it's gonna hurt me. Can I survive this? Are you with partners, right? So do you feel like that's something that played in your relationships?
I think that now as an adult, what I most seek in a partner is a sense of home.
Hmm.
Like, do I feel like at peace, and do I feel like I'm ready to like, and throughout my 20s and my early 30s, every time I was with somebody, I felt like, oh, this is a wonderful person, but clearly there's always felt like, oh, this won't last,
Why is that? Just
because I always felt like wherever I was would never last.
interesting.
And now I'm like, okay, I need to work through that. And now what I'm most looking for is someone that I can, oh, this it's not even like will it last, will it not last? Just like, oh, I feel comfortable, I feel safe, I feel like home. And maybe that will prevent me from like to move on or to
Hmm.
continue my journey.
So looking back, do you think there are relationships where you thought you could have stayed but you didn't? And is there any kind of regret there?
Oh yeah, sure, for sure. I mean, I was fortunate that I've met some incredible women in my life, but I wasn't ready. You know, I wasn't ready because I didn't know what I was dealing with. I swear to you, it wasn't until I wrote this book that I really had to deal with like very personal issues. There's nothing like sitting down, reflecting on your life,
Hmm.
putting pen to paper in your recollections, but above all, discovering the stories you were told as a child were lies.
Interesting.
That really broke me as I was. This is a comedy. It's a comedy, but when I was writing it, I just kept crying. I couldn't stop crying, making these discoveries of, oh, that was fake, or this building
Hmm.
block of this story for this person was not true.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Wow, there's a lot to unpack
I
here.
know. Just
Illegally
let's listen to
yours.
the waterfall, the pool.
Yes, do you feel zen?
I feel very.
But you're not Mexican, as most immigrants in the LA, California area are.
Yeah,
You are
I
Ecuadorian.
am.
So tell us a little bit more about your family heritage.
Born in Ecuador, South America,
Mhm.
in Guayaquil. You know, it's funny. Every time there was a family celebration at my grandfather's house, he always hired mariachis. So I grew up thinking that mariachis was meant for celebration. An anniversary, a birthday, a holiday, we always had mariachis. So I was like, okay, mariachis are Ecuadorian because I grew up with them. Then we come to LA, and then my neighbors they play mariachi, and I was like, oh, so you listen to Ecuadorian mariachis too? And they were like, you silly bastard, you
Oh,
have
that's
no idea what
sweet.
you're talking about. So I always thought that mariachis were from Ecuadorian.
Oh, that's so sweet. I really love that. Now, I know from growing up in Brazil, it's been a struggle through my relationships, and the listeners have been part of that. I end up really attracted to like machista men. And a lot of the
Mm,
time, I think it has to do with this patriarchal idea of what men are supposed to be like. And growing up in Brazil, one of my friends said to me once, like, oh, yeah, he maybe feels like home because he reminds you of where you came from.
ooh, he reminds you of your trauma.
And not
Jesus.
necessarily is a good thing. Exactly. In Ecuador, do you experience the same thing about what is the role of a male in
Oh
the
yeah, oh
society?
yeah. Not just in Ecuador, like here in the United States, like because we bring that culture, then my family here, it's always been that way, and we're only now trying to like break out of that. Funny enough, I was telling you earlier that I was watching this like little documentary with Becky G, who's a phenomenal like U.S. Latina musician and artist, and she was saying that what's so sad is that men in our culture are taught that they're strongest when they feel the least, or like they don't deal with
Mm,
their
right.
emotion. But women are the opposite. They're taught that the more pain you can suffer, the stronger you are. And that's that horrible dichotomy that we have to break out of.
Yeah, that women have to suffer through abusive
Correct.
relationships to stay in some kind of successful relationship.
Correct.
But men get to be abusive and aggro and aggressive if
And
needed
then
be.
deal with their emotions
Right.
and like not even.
A lot of anger comes from that, from not being able to feel.
Yeah.
Did you experience any of that growing up?
Yeah, there was a lot of machistas in my family. Funny enough, all starts flowing. Everyone's "I love you," and then when everyone's sober, everyone's like all hardcore again. I'm like, where was this love we were talking about just last night? Like, where did that go?
Yeah, where did that go? Did you guys ever have that post conversation?
Well,
Was
I
it a not don't
I
touch that
have
thing?
powerful story that I remember that I wrote in the book. The chapter is literally called "The Machismo Facade,"
Wow.
and it was the first time my dad cried in my presence.
What was it about?
Um, it was so I was in community college at the time, not knowing how long my immigration limbo would last. So I started doing like theater, which is so weird. Because I felt like I had been acting American most of my life. So I was like, oh, acting on stage, that seems like appropriate and something I'm comfortable with. And I did a Chicano play called Short Roosters. I did Roosters.
Okay.
And that story is a father and son that are estranged from each other. So when I was on stage, all I kept thinking was like, man, I hope I get my blocking right in this lighting and don't forget my lines. But when my dad went to watch it, he thought I was like really projecting our relationship on that stage.
Wow.
So he thought like all that anger that I was portraying was toward like pointed at him. So when we got home that night to celebrate this performance in my first like theatrical, just started crying. He just started crying in my presence, and he said, "I'm sorry." And the whole time I was like, "Ain't no one thinking about you."
You're like, yo, Dad, it's about me.
But I didn't say that because I thought it was important to let him cry, and I thought this thought that they always say blood is thicker than water, but I believe that love is thicker than blood. So my dad, actually my stepdad, he's not my biological dad. And the fact that he was able to cry in front of me, and my God, I was, community college. I must have been like 19. It took that long for him to ever show weakness and vulnerability in front of me. And I thought that was such a beautiful moment. Like just two men who loved each other, crying in each other's presence, dealing with their fucking emotions. Like that never happened before. So I wanted to write that chapter.
And where's their relationship now? Did that generate long-lasting healing, you think?
It did for a while. Right now we're not in speaking terms right now because of some things that had happened with my mom and stuff, but he's still dealing with his trauma, and I'm hoping to God that he deals with it and finds the happiness that he's looking for. I hope everyone does.
Right.
And all I can do is help my mom on her road to healing.
And I kept thinking, like, are we all trying to find our road to healing, right? And how do these things from our past and our history really play parts in the relationships we're trying to build? I love you talking about how it was the first time he's, when the alcohol starts to flow, then I'm a very honest drunk. When
everybody's an honest drunk.
That's true.
They were lying when they were drunk.
Different drunks. There's like the pass out drunk. There's like the blackout drunk.
Of course. Yeah.
And then there's like the angry
drunk.
And I'm like that. Let's all come to Brazil and make my family drunk. Me. But the last relationship I had, that guy said I love you for the first time. He was drunk, and the next day he couldn't remember. I have a friend who asked me when the relationship started to dwindle, he's like, are you okay with that? Are you okay being with someone who can't remember the first time they said I love you to you? And that really hit home. That really did, because no, I'm not okay with that.
Wow.
Right? So when you start to think about that, how do these experiences of coming from a different culture, learning that you're not who you were, and trying to find your identity really shaped who you are?
I mean, I'm still trying to figure out what it is, because culture inside my household, I'm like, okay, I guess it's supposed to be it. But then you come out and you discover like entire different community that has a different sense of culture and priorities. And then you go to college and university, you start learning about other people's cultures. And I feel like I've been trying to search for like, what does it mean to be a modern like male? What does it mean to be a modern like Latino male? I remember when I was still young and I watched Ricky Martin perform on the Grammys for the first time. I wrote about it in the book too, because I felt Ricky Martin redefined both male sexuality and what it meant to be a Latin man, like in real time, on stage, live on television, for all of the United States to see. I was like, this is happening right now.
So did you get to a conclusion? What is it like to be a Latino male in real time right now? Like, what does that mean to you?
I think, we're constantly redefining who we are. We're
Mhm.
constantly trying to be better for sure.
I hope so.
Um,
Not all of us, but I hope most of us.
I hope most of you do too. I just listen, for me personally, I know my dad did the best that he could. I also know it wasn't as good as it should have been. So I'm hoping to break that cycle
Mhm.
and to do better
In what
for
ways? In what ways do you better? I think that's important.
in the way you love somebody, and the way that you forgive somebody, and the way that you definitely do not want them to feel like they can't express their emotions or that they
Mhm.
can't like express who they are. Just
Especially boys. I think that's very true
especially
for
boys,
boys.
especially boys.
And like we were talking earlier, I mentioned this book called The Will to Change, which is written
Yes,
by a
yes.
feminist about the boys' experience in the world, but generally in America, and how really boys are raised to have no feelings, to be emotionless. That's what it means to be a strong male. And it really just jeopardizes everyone. And when men grow up to be very upset and very angry, and we call them, oh, you're aggro, you're upset, I understand it.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, oh yeah, if I couldn't have feelings, I would also be very upset.
I feel like men in my family were that,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like the women in my family were not.
Okay.
So it was interesting. It was like balance those two things out. I feel like my mom was always so like loving and wanted me to be loving. Uh, and my dad was more like rigid and wanted me to be strong and stern. So I don't know. It,
I also feel that that's an interesting description. Loving and stern and strong. Loving and go together,
correct.
right? I think there's nothing more brave than being vulnerable.
Wow.
And that's very hard.
I can't believe you just said that because I realized that my biggest life was always my vulnerability. But when I was younger, I didn't acknowledge it, or at the very least, I was like kind of ashamed of it because it wasn't until I learned to be vulnerable, until I
Mhm.
learned to open up, especially about like, my legality and stuff
Right.
like that, because I never talked about it.
Which is huge.
The minute I started doing that with people outside of my family, outside of my culture, things started to change for me.
In what way?
I Well, you grew up feeling a little ashamed of who you are. So when my college professor for the first time that I was undocumented, and I was like, I didn't even know if I wanted to tell her, but her reaction really defined the rest of my adult life. If she
Interesting.
because if like concerned or like call authorities, you know what I mean? I would have probably sunken back into that
Right.
shame. But because she herself was so caring and so concerned and was like, how can we fix this together? I was like, oh, then this is not something I should be ashamed of, right?
Yeah.
So it was that vulnerability that allowed me to find this sense of like starting to find my sense of self-esteem and self-respect and self-worth. Um, but also that vulnerability is what makes great artists.
Right.
You don't watch a movie or you read a book or you you interact with a piece of art, like it's always the vulnerability that attracts you to the
Yeah.
piece. And I also believe that to be the case when it comes to corporate America. I believe the best leaders are always the ones who are willing to be vulnerable. I
Interesting.
mean, I'm CEO of the Latino Film Institute. There was a long time where I couldn't tell people like, oh, I don't know, or oh, let's find out together. And I feel like vulnerability plays a part in that. So yeah, it took me a very long time to be like, oh wow, you know what? Vulnerability that people like, we're taught not to show,
Right.
that was actually a superpower. And we should have been such.
Wow. That's really powerful. And I think imposter syndrome is such a thing that people talk about now.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I don't feel deserving. I shouldn't have had this. And it plays both with men and women in
Yeah.
the same way. But I think with people of color more than the average mainstream America, because I think we were taught so much that we should just be grateful. What we get is what we get.
Yeah.
It's just great to be here.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot of knowing that like it's okay to say, I don't know this, let's learn together. There's so much power in that. There's so
I think
much of
so.
leadership into admitting of, okay, we can be a team, and that's good. I don't have to know it all, and I'm constantly trying to learn from other people as much as I can. But I love what you said about We were talking about Russ earlier. And yes,
The hip
and
hop
like
artist.
in the hip hop artist and how it's all in your head. And he talks about a little bit of what you said about how it's so important to just be aware and just consistently stay in the game, you know, and it's so interesting, I think, to be a person of color in America. You know, I always joke that I didn't know I was of color until I moved here.
Oh, I didn't either.
Right?
Yeah.
Isn't that a fascinating thing? In Brazil, we're just kind of all different colors. But the year I moved to America, we were self-described 586 different like races. People just called themselves different things, like burned from the sun, a little bit dark, or whatever. And it's so interesting to think about that because I just thought we were all the same unless we were African. We're from African descent or we were indigenous. Everybody else is just the same. We're just brown. And here is a delineation of like we are the same or we're different. And I think that played a lot into my identity and that played a lot into my relationships. And I dated a lot of white guys. It's okay to say that until I dated a Latino.
You dated the
I did. Shh, don't tell my mother. And then I dated Latino guys, and it's different because I don't think I can go back to dating white guys just because it had like there's so much into emotional connection,
Yeah.
understanding of where you come from without explaining that you don't get with somebody, jokes aside, like the colonizer, but somebody who is feels entitled to be born here. There's a difference between I was born here and this is my place and something that is like I came here and I just am trying to stay. So there's a different energy around that. And I think that's very interesting about upbringing and also about what you bring to relationships.
Oh, 100%.
Did you feel anything like that in your case?
Well, I mean, we joked about colonizer, but the Portuguese, the Spanish, and the English colonized differently.
Yes.
Right? Some people replaced and displaced, while other people are like raped and pillaged. So you think about English when they colonized it, they like replace people. They slaughter them, they remove them, and they go, we need to maintain that sense of purity. And in the Spanish, we're like, hey, we need to expand the crown. Let's make love and rape everybody. So, I mean, we are removed, but we're all still feeling those effects.
Yes. Yes. How does it apply to your relationship?
I'm still trying to figure it out.
Oh,
I'm still trying to figure it out.
It's still a mystery, but it's hard for all of us. And I feel like from my personal experience, there is something about growing up Latino and like I would go home and pick up all my friends' kids and kiss them and hug them. It's something I don't feel comfortable doing in America, right? There's a sense of distance that you need to have of like the personal space thing of what's appropriate. And I felt that in my relationships. Like there are, you know, the men in relationship that were Latino.
I felt that at work as I started climbing in corporate America. Like I hug like men, women. And then when I see like the women in my family, I always give them a kiss on the cheek. So I get to corporate America, people are like, what are you doing? Get away. You do not touch people. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't mean
pandemic.
Yeah, I'm like, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to make anyone feel inappropriate. Yes, I'll stand my distance. I had to learn all that.
But it's so interesting because there is an element of that that is very intrinsic into the business that like there is people we know who like to cross those lines. But it's not what happens in the Latin culture. You know, we do 2 kisses in Brazil, like we hug everybody. Baby, I see this, my friend's baby. I will pick that baby up. I will, you know, kiss it. You know, and I felt that in my Latino relationships in a way that I didn't feel that warmth in my interracial relationships.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But the biggest difference, I think, in my relationships with Latina or, you know, Asian American, white, black, whatever, the cooking.
The cooking.
Different.
I don't cook.
See?
I tried.
Never gonna work.
Oh, shit.
But
the book is
great. Just get some Postmates, you'll be good.
Exactly. Who needs to cook in the postmodern world? That we're all independent people, just you know, trying to make it. I did burn George Foreman grill earlier this week, so I've been on a strict salad diet ever since.
Oh my god!
Before it was sandwiches and salads, but you know, again, I was raised by a Latino mother who, instead of being like a head of a household, she wanted me to be independent. So she never taught me any of the domestic things.
Wow.
And I'm still like kind of dealing with the reckoning of that. moving to America, I'm like, I gotta do laundry and I gotta make my own food and I gotta like I'm now painting my house and
That's
it's
awesome.
I
Congratulations.
wish I had thought that way. It's a lot of work, but at the end of the day, when it's done, I feel
Mm,
the sense of home back to, being undocumented and being from a foreign country. It's huge. And it's
yeah.
something that I look for in my relationships. So what does home mean to you?
Love, it means safety, it means comfort. Yeah.
I think those are great terms, but they're very general. How would they manifest in a relationship to you? How would home, comfort, and safety manifest in a relationship?
Um,
Honesty, like open
Trust,
commitment.
good communication, respect. I mean, still general terms, but that's how they manifest, I think, in a relationship.
Right. It's communication is so hard and
Oh
it's
my
so
God.
needed. But again, it's like, but the vulnerability we're talking about, right? The more vulnerable you are with yourself, more you can be with other people. And that's one thing that I realized. Like I can't demand and communication from people who can't do that for themselves.
Correct.
And at the end of the day, it just, makes you feel love and care for those people who can't get there.
Yeah, you could, I mean, you'll never lose that love for people, but you just need to know who you let into your life and who you don't. Who
Right.
you let into your heart and who you don't. That's
So
that's hard to determine.
I will say this, like a couple relationships ago, I was talking to a friend in New York and I'm telling him this horrendous dating story. And he's an LGBTQIA plus
Okay.
person. And he looks at me, he goes, why are you letting these people into your life? And I remember thinking, I don't know, they just come and like he's like, yes, you pretty woman, you will attract a lot of random people. Why are you allowing them to stay? And that changed everything for me because it changed from, yes, all of the walks of life will come to you, but you get to choose who you entertain, who you spend your time on, and who you allow. Now, do you have any advice or tips for our listeners when it comes to that?
No, I'm the worst because I'm a people pleaser and I'm always trying to be everything for everyone, and it's so exhausting. I'm only now this late in my life trying to be like, okay, I need to create boundaries for myself. I need to learn to say no to certain things, and also like I need to at being a better like friend to the people that really really matter.
Tell me more. In
And
what way?
because again, I give so much of myself to so many people, so I try to with everybody, but when you're not gonna have 40 best friends, so like
Right.
let's be real, like who's your crew? Okay, these 4 people are my crew, and I really need to put time and energy into them versus spreading out my love to so many different people.
So boundaries, prioritizing the people in your life.
Prioritizing is so important.
We were talking about this earlier. It's amazing how sometimes you're just like, I just want to hang out. I just want a friend who is just like a bud. But then 10 years go by and you're still hanging out with those buds and
Yeah.
nothing happens and nothing came out of it. I joke aside these days, but I'm like, if you're not holding my baby in the future, I don't want you in my life. It's like, are you that kind of friend where
Listen, if you're not showing up to the hospital when I get hurt, then I don't need you
right.
in my life.
Exactly. So what kind of relationships are we building?
Yeah.
And that's important. And boundaries are a big issue for me too. I think I am before. So a people pleaser is the way that I got by in life. Like, how do I survive? And was like, okay, I'll give them what they need so I can survive the situation. What are some things that
Well,
you've
I
done?
was gonna say
Yeah.
you're one of four, only child.
Hmm.
And as an only child, I always sought for family. So every
Interesting.
time I went to a new school or join a new organization or a new group, I'm always searching for family. I'm always like, oh, can you be my family? And the reason I have no boundaries is because for everyone that I want to make my family, I'm like, come to my home, take everything. Like what's
Right.
mine is yours. I mean, so those are the things I'm still trying to.
But it's not reciprocated.
I mean, when it is, it's like friends for life. But when it's not, you're like, ah,
Yeah. And did you find that what is the percentage that it is reciprocated and it is not?
oh, I haven't done the numbers, but yeah,
Yeah.
you already know the answer.
Yeah. And that's the point. It's know who you invest your
Yes,
time in.
yes,
And it's okay to be a giver. And I was saying this earlier to Rafa, it's like I am someone who prides myself into giving people the benefit of the doubt. One of my biggest qualities is I believe in people. I know you can do better. And then all of the times I get hurt and disappointed. But that doesn't make me want to be less giving, less welcoming.
And that's the act of courage you were talking about earlier.
Maybe, but maybe it's just my pleasing ways. I'm gonna be like, yes, sure, why not?
But the easy thing is to get like hard and cold-hearted. I mean, like,
yes,
it's courageous to be like, you know what, this happened to me, and I'm still gonna choose to love people.
I can get hurt, but it won't discourage me to keep going.
There you go.
And as you've listened to my journey with Dr. Terry Mack, as I am unpacking all these relationship things, I'm hoping that, I know to discern the good people from the people who don't deserve my time.
Yeah.
And same for you. We wrap. Any last words to our listeners on culture and relationships and what to watch for, what to lean into?
The only thing I can say is about like the book itself. Like, it was my goal, try to write kind of like an immigrant story, an immigrant family story, but with the POV that we were and have American. That's my goal. I want people to see our community as part of this American fabric, because I remind folks that Brazil, you're not Latina, you're Brazilian. In Ecuador, I'm not Latino, I'm Ecuadorian. In Mexico, I'm not Latino, I'm Mexican. But in the United States, we're all Latinos. So to me, being Latino is a uniquely American experience.
Yes.
And that's what I was trying to do with the book. I was trying to be like, we are all American. Now come read a story that you yourself can relate to, because there's so much of you in this book. Because there's so much of you in us.
Yeah, and it's really not about being an outsider. It's about being part of a group that is part of a bigger dream. Yeah. That's what we all want, right? Make our dreams come true.
Correct.
So thank you for being here today.
Thank
you guys. Illegally Yours is available where?
Wherever books are sold. You can get it anywhere. Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, your local independent bookstore.
Yeah. So get your copy. It is a good read. Not that big of a book, although it looks very hefty. It's under 300 pages. It is worth it. There are no pictures.
No pictures.
I'm just going to tell you, you're going to have to
Except this one.
And you're going to have to follow Rafi online on what's your handle?
Mr. Rafael Agustin.
For pictures. It's a great story. Thanks for being here today and discussing with us love and culture. Stay tuned for our next episode.